Is it harder to raise $25 million to make a film, or is it harder to raise $1 or $2 million for a smaller film?
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
The answer is easy. It's hard to raise $1 million than $25 million. I'm just saying there's a prejudice against films under $1 million.
People's Minister of Information, JR. We are still at the Black Comic and Art Festival. I'm here with the comic illustrator and founder of 133 Art. He has the One Nation comic. His name is Jason Reeves. Jason, how are you?
How you doing, man?
I'm good.
Good to meet you.
You too.
Yeah.
Well, tell the people a little bit about One Nation. What is the Black Comic One Nation about?
One Nation is about a group of individuals who have special abilities. We call them karamats. It's loosely translated to miracles. And these miracles, or these karamats, are supposed to come together to kind of create an age of peace on the earth. But it's easier said than done. So the first issue is about our main character, Deacon Taylor, a.k.a. Paragon. And what happens is Paragon has suppressed his powers all his life because he doesn't want to be a lab experiment for the government. But he ends up going off to war and having to choose between keeping his secret or saving his unit when they get ambushed in the Middle East. So and he goes from there to become, to meet these other Karamat individuals and see what they become.
So where is it based?
It's based all over the world, actually. These individuals are not just like focused locally to America. These people, Sundiata here on the cover of Old Druids, is from Africa. This guy. And of course, Deacon Paragon is from America, and this guy Pollux in Black Lotus is from Japan. So it's people who are seated with these abilities, and it's all over the world.
So do these stories come to you individually, or did you already think this story out and you just telling it in segments?
I work from like a loose outline, and whatever inspires me kind of informs how I develop the things from that outline. So I have a sort of loose outline I work from. Yeah.
Is it about the message or is it about the story? Do you build a story around a message, or do you try to extract the message out of the story that you already see? Which one is first?
I start from the message. You have to have an idea of what you want to say, and then the story kind of develops from there, at least for me.
And I understand that you draw most of the most of the pictures.
Right. I draw the main series, One Nation, and then we have sort of side quest type stories, origin stories that I commission like artist friends and just artists basically that I like to do.
Do you know what these people look like, or do you give your artist friends like a license to develop what this person looks like?
Both. Since I'm an illustrator myself, I usually have a good idea of what I want, and then I tell my artist friends, I'm open to ideas, and then we kind of come down the middle with the ideas.
Creatively speaking, do you write every day, or what is the process? What is your creative process like when you're developing your newest comic book?
I'm mostly an illustrator, so my process is always visual. So I'm drawing every day, and then because I'm not a writer full time, I can wait till inspiration hits me. And then I work with a writer, Al Vernball. He's my co-writer. He's the guy that makes me look good script-wise. He's the guy that's writing every day. So we kind of go back and forth. And then when inspiration hits me, I do an outline, from the loose outline, and Al Vern makes it coherent.
Is it hard being a black comic book writer?
Financially, a little bit. It's not hard to get up and do it because I love it, but I would love to make a full-time living at it, That would be good.
Do you want to work for Marvel or DC, or are you happy with blowing One Nation?
I wouldn't mind kind of doing like a miniseries or something for Marvel and DC. I mean, we grew up with those characters and we love them, but at the same time, I love the idea of taking an IP to the next level.
What's an IP?
Intellectual property. So One Nation is my intellectual property, basically. I like the idea of taking that idea to another level. Comics, video games, movies, all kinds of different media, merchandising, and I like being the guy that can helm it. Like George Lucas did with Star Wars. I think a lot of black artists want to have that level of respect and that level of awareness and, that level of being able to eat off of what you create. So that's the ultimate goal.
How can people stay in contact with you?
They can check out our website at 133art.com. We're on Facebook, 133art. We're on Twitter as 133art. And we're on Instagram as 133art.
Well, thank you, bro. Keep doing your thing. Jason Reeves, One Nation Comics.
Assassinos!
É tu, Luca, que funge.
Calma, Cambo! Angola, o nosso pai está morto!
O papá morreu pelo chão de um dongo. Honrou o sangue dos nossos antepassados.
Acha que eles podem me trair?
Acho que só um herdeiro deve continuar vivo. E os umbigos dos outros devem ser todos enterrados no chão.
Mbandi não tem força nem inteligência para vencer a guerra contra os portugueses. Eu vou lá estar para defender o meu povo quando Mbandi cair. Fala só, Mbandi. Que pedido é esse?
Preciso que vás a Luanda tratar a paz com os Mundele.
M. Eu?
Sim. Tu és a Mucuz de Angola, Ginga. Nosso pai teria escolhido a ti para esta missão.
O reino do Ndongo é soberano. Não pode ser vassalo de outro. O Ndongo Xiame, nossa terra, a herança dos nossos antepassados. Eu lhe honro e lhe respeito e vou lutar por ela até vencer.
Manda lá aí, Maiai. Para que me queres aqui, Ginga?
Para desprender o nosso desejo.
Pelo poder que me é dado por El Rei de Portugal, declaro essa Ginga como a principal inimiga do reino português. Reúna todas as tropas que conseguir e marche contra ela. Quero a cabeça de Ginga.
Eu vou entregar-lhe uma salva de prata.
Os portugueses me traíram, me perseguiram, roubaram o nosso chão.
E nossa irmã? Ela estava lá a escutar para nos informar.
A guerra só nos tem prejudicado. As peças de escravos diminuíram. Nós não conseguimos encher as caravelas para enviar para o Brasil.
Qual é a proposta?
Nós não vos atacamos e vocês não nos atacam.
Mas para podermos honrar esse trato, vamos ter de eliminar a Ginga.
Façam com Ginga o que quiserem.
Eu vou dar luta aos meus inimigos até a eternidade. Não vou perdoar mais a vida a nenhum português.
O que é isso?
Mas que modos são esses com a princesa?
Os portugueses empurraram Ginga para fora do trono de Ndongo, mas os espíritos estão com ela. O trono pertence a Ginga. Nenhum vivo, nenhum morto pode nada contra isso.
We still at the Black Comic and Art Festival in San Francisco, the second annual one. I'm here with the legendary Dawud Anyebwile.
Sir.
And he is a legendary illustrator. We are here to talk to him a little bit about the Black comic book history. How you doing, brother?
I'm good.
Tell us a little bit about the history of Black comic books.
Well, I'm not really one to be like the historian of Black comics. I kind of know our place in the history. When my brothers and I we introduced Brotherman at the Black Expo in New York in 1990. And at the time we came out, there really wasn't a Black comic movement. It's like our book is recognized as a catalyst to this movement. You know, there was no Black comic conventions. As far as independent publishers, there was very few. And usually out of the few, we kind of like knew each other. But Brotherman was the one that kind of pushed into the marketplace, was getting recognized by a lot of the press. And I think also not only because it was a Black hero, we created a Black universe. The world that Brotherman lives in is a Black universe and was produced by a Black family. So all those aspects created this frenzy and created an excitement during the early 90s, which led to a lot of other independents who started creating their own comic books. Also, what then started to happen was some of the mainstream started reintroducing some of their black characters because there was this groundswell of, a black comic movement. So to me, I say it's akin to the early days of hip hop, where you have a lot of independents at first, then you have the big record companies that start signing people, then all of a sudden they start moving their other acts aside, start putting in hip hop acts because they're seeing the money, the potential in the money that's coming from the streets. So it's the same thing happening with the comic books because you had this push of independence, but then you're going to start seeing the bigger companies wanting to come in and get in on the action, which is going to happen. But to me, I look at it beyond comics. I look at it as commerce, something that when you buy the comic, who benefits from it? Whose children benefit from it? Right. You know what I mean? Not just the image in the comic, but who owns the comic. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but that's kind of like the foundation of how I see it.
What was the purpose of Brotherman?
Well, when we first came out with the book, it was really, we were in East Orange, New Jersey at the time, right across the river from Manhattan, and the Black Expo New York started a year before. And it was basically simply because we knew nobody was going to have a comic book at the Black Expo. And this is a business expo that thousands of people are coming,
Well, I mean, when I say what was the purpose, I mean, what was the message in the book?
Oh, okay.
What was the purpose of the book in terms of its message?
Well, the book was basically about, what we wanted to do was create something that shows us in a whole nother perspective. And I wouldn't even say that that was a conscious effort because it's kind of a reflection of who I always was. My work always reflected trying to show the best of who we were. But in Brotherman, the main character, Antonio Valor, he's a lawyer in this fictitious city called Big City. And it's kind of basically like consciousness versus apathy. He's this brother who's committed to bringing this city, raising it back up to its original greatness. But around him are a lot of people who just don't care. So the reason why a lot of times things fall into decay is because people don't care. And then the people who are fighting to raise it up, they usually their circle of friends gets smaller and smaller because it's easier to be part of the masses that kind of don't care. So Brotherman is a metaphor. The whole story is a metaphor. The brother of man, the light in the night. Anybody who reads the graphic novel, Brotherman Revelation, we're telling the origin story of Antonio Valor, where the name Brotherman he got from a poem that his father gave him. So it's basically like your dad giving you The Last Poets or Gil Scott Heron, and it's talking about the brother of man, the dictator of just discipline. But since he liked comic books, it sounded like a superhero to him. It was like, oh man, this brother who's so righteous, whatever, I'm going to take that and make that my moniker. I'm going to be Brotherman. But he doesn't own the title like Peter Parker owns Spider-Man, Clark Kent owns Superman. You can't be Superman. You can't be Spider-Man, but you can be Brotherman. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Like all these kids out here, they can be Brotherman if you take on these attributes. You see what I'm saying? So that's what this book represents, and that's why I say the whole thing is metaphorically represents our existence in America.
You know what's interesting to that? You know what that kind of just gave me, it alluded to me, like the Egyptian concept of Jesus Christ, where you can rise, anybody can rise to Christdom,
right?
Versus the white Christian Roman Catholic Church definition of Jesus Christ, who is this unreachable Savior, Son of God.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference in between the white superheroes versus the black superheroes.
Right, because when you
it goes all the way back to our God.
Well, I was about to say, because even with religion, it takes God outside of you to looking outside someplace else for God, but you don't see yourself as God.
Right.
You don't see the things around you as God. So it puts you in a powerless position. I need Superman. I need such and such. And that translates to your reality. I can't do anything without this. I can't do it. You know, you start sounding like, come on, man, you could do something, get up and do it.
Right.
So
Quit putting your hand out.
Right. So in Brotherman, it's not like he can solve all the problems. He's showing people that, yo, you can do the same thing I'm doing.
Break out the slave mentality.
That's basically what it is. The whole universe of Big City. Let me show you. They got their own subway map. It's a sovereign universe. Big City is not just about a superhero. It's about the universe that the character lives in. So they have their own subway system. They have their own, let me show you this. I don't know if you get a good shot of that. They have their own currency.
Black money.
But they call them knots.
Not knots. A knot in your pocket.
Right. So you got 5,000 knots. We have the history of Big City. These are the ancients, the ancestors that built the city. So we have the history in the back of the book. All that corresponds. So as you're reading the book, you can see where they're at. They talk about it in the book. So you can see where they are on the map. That corresponds to, like, whenever you see, like, say if you see somebody who's the downtrodden in the city and they're counting money. So they could be like the thug or whatever, or the gangster. But when they're counting money, even though they're maybe at the bottom rung of the ladder, when they look at the money, they still see a reflection of themselves that's at the top.
Right.
It's not like they're seeing a reflection of somebody else, which reminds them that, man, I have no power. So this book is a paradigm. It's a paradigm shift, which affects young minds to say, well, you know what? I want my reality to be like that.
You know what you sound like to me, man? You sound like a comic book John Henry Clark. You know, and I mean that's I appreciate it, because I mean you have a lot of the same messages that he has, but you put it into a character and characters. So, man, let me ask you. I see that you started out doing comic books. Now we're in the era of the graphic novel. Is there anything that's different when you're a man that's lived in both eras? What's the difference in the platform, and does that affect how you write it?
Well, I think the difference is, like, when we did the comic book, it was a 24-page black and white book. You know, we were going through our incubation stage in the early days. When we came back and we said, look, it's been 19 years, let's do a graphic novel. And if it's going to be a graphic novel, let's make it a graphic novel. So we said, let's go. It's 300 pages. This is just the first segment out of 3 books. It's a trilogy. So we wanted to get detailed with the story, and we wanted to be more cinematic with the story. So anybody who looks at the graphic novel now and looks at the earlier books, you'll see a difference in the style, but at the same time, it's a 20-year difference. You know, I was 25 then, I'm 50 years old now. So there's a lot of growth. But to me, it's still the same thing. You're storytelling. That goes back to the early scribes. You know what I mean? Storytelling is storytelling, no matter if it's carving in a wall, comic book, graphic novel, storyboard, whatever. It's all what's in your mind and what you put on paper.
Who inspired you?
My inspiration runs deep. Starts with my parents. They both passed away, but my father and my mother, they both cultivated the arts in the home, history, loving yourself, all that. Artistically, my friends, I knew a lot of different artists coming up, all different types of artists, from graffiti writers to illustrators.
Name them, man.
Oh, man, it's just too many.
Well, just name a few, man. I mean, I'm trying to get these youngsters somebody to reference. Then, OGs like you is always accusing the youngsters and not knowing their history. Throw some references for them.
Hey, I don't never accuse nobody.
Okay, I ain't saying you accuse
them.
Okay. But I am saying that generation accuses, oh, man, this ain't in the 70s, we knew this, and in the 80s, we knew this, and da 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 da. But we need them references, my brother.
Well, one of my main influences was Overton Lloyd, who did Parliament Funkadelic. You know what I'm saying? I was like 14 years old when I first saw Sir Nose Devoid of Funk.
I know exactly who that is.
Yeah, and that opened me up. Other than him was Ernie
So
Barnes.
you telling me that Parliament influenced Brotherman?
Parliament was a big part.
I could see it.
You know what I'm saying? The Funkadelic.
The revolution in a different platform.
Yeah, George Clinton. And then after that, Ernie Barnes from Good Times.
Man, a writer of Good Time, son. That's Ernie Barnes. Yeah.
Ernie Barnes. He did the illustration.
Wow.
Did all the illustration work, and then a lot of my friends just back home who were doing stuff. I mean, I'm kind of drawing a blank, man.
But that's cool, man. Well, at least you threw 2 of them out there. You know, we didn't let you get away and be super secretive. Well, I appreciate you, my brother.
Hey, man, I appreciate.
It's the People's Minister of Information, JR, and I'm here at the Black Comics and Art Festival with the legendary sci-fi Black futurist author, Miss Nalo Hopkinson. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Can you tell the people a little bit about what's the importance of imagination? We've been talking about imagination a little bit at your panel yesterday, and you're heavy with your imagination. Can you tell people a little bit about the importance of an imagination and what role it plays in society?
Yeah, I usually do that by quoting 2 Black authors. Samuel R. Delany, who was a mentor of mine, Black science fiction writer, one of the first. And he says, we need images of the future, and our people need them more than most. And then Walter Mosley, who also writes science fiction, has said that, if you want to make a better world, you need to be able to imagine what that world is so you have a direction to go in. That's part of the reason I write. I got to be honest that a lot of it is because I like writing science fiction fantasy. But my own history, my culture, my language, everything makes its way into it. What's happening to Black people all around the planet makes its way into it.
You have a very interesting accent. Where's that from?
Only Americans find it interesting. Y'all hear more in it than I do. It's part Caribbean. I was born in Jamaica, lived in Jamaica, Trinidad, and Guyana, and it's part Canadian because I've been in Canada. I was in Canada for about 35 years.
How does all of this play into your work? How does all of this influence your work?
Well, Caribbean culture is always in my work. Caribbean language is always in my work. Caribbean food is always in my work. And I also, a lot of people who have never been to the Caribbean think that it is just about sun and sand and ganja. And for sure, all those 3 things are there. But we are our country in the West, just like anybody else. We're as up to the minute with technology. We're as concerned with everything else that's going on in the world. So I make sure that I put Caribbean realities into my stories as much as possible. And Caribbean people are all over the world. So some of my stories are based in Toronto, where I lived for 35 years.
How much does the past play a part in the future in your work?
The past is the way we get to the future. So I have to know it. Whenever I'm researching, you have to research to write science fiction or fantasy. Fantasy tends to be based in the past, so you need to research your history. And like I said, the past is how we get to the future. So I have to find out what is and was happening that might lead to the stories that I'm writing about that are set in the future.
You have 10 books. When you sit down to write a book, do you know what you're going to write when you write page 1? Do you know what you're going to write on page 310? Or does the book write itself as you type it out or write it out?
Neither one. Writers write all kinds of different ways. Whatever gets you to a finished piece, that is valid. I usually don't know where I'm going to end up. And the book for sure does not write itself. That is blood, sweat, and tears on that page. And I always have to rewrite. I don't know, I can't tell you how many rewrites because it'll be a partial rewrite. Some pages I might go over, hundreds of times. Some it might be 1 or 2 times. But a book doesn't just sit down and write itself. You build it up in layers, like you're doing a painting. And sometimes you have to scrape off a piece of one layer and start all over again, or scrape off a piece and add something in and decide you need a different color. It's like that with writing.
What is the future of Black futurist writing?
That is a very skillful question. I thought you were going to ask me what is the black future. Science fiction writers, we don't write to try and figure out the future. We're really writing about the present and casting a different lens on it, saying, you know, if this continues, think of where we might get to. The future, black futures writing is a different thing, and we've always been doing it. And I think more and more people are beginning to realize that we're here, and so that means that there are going to be more young writers doing it as well, and that's a future I welcome.
Miss Nalo Hopkinson, legendary black sci-fi author. Make sure you guys check her out at your local black bookstore or online. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
I'm Deuce Eclipse from Baghdad, and you're watching the fantastic traveling film circus. Coqui Calavera en la casa. Calaveras all day, baby. One love.
And in comics, there are two kinds of black people. There's Shaft, and there's Sidney Poitier.
African-American male superhero characters have a burden, an added burden of being seen as sort of hyper-masculine.
You know, the whole black buck, angry black man stereotype.
Until the past 20 years, everyone was writing as white. So whether the depiction was something I embraced or rejected, is still white people writing.
The minute they saw a black comic book in there, they sent the bundles back. So it was a catastrophe for Dell Comics.
And if somebody like Luke Cage represents one pole of the black superheroes, then the Black Panther is all the way at the other end.
Black Panther is the first black character, but he's not the first American who is black in comic book. It's the Falcon. African American is the Falcon.
They didn't do a John Stewart comic. They didn't make John Stewart the Green Lantern in their Justice League. They didn't pick up on it because they're very comfortable with what they were doing.
I had, how can I describe it? I had a love-hate relationship with Luke Cage.
Yeah, you know, man, this is weird. I like Luke Cage, but I was also a little bit embarrassed.
I never really understood what hero for hire meant. And he said, man, you gotta pay him. You don't have to pay, you know, you only have to pay Hulk. On instinct, he turns green. You know what I mean? And he'll destroy everything, but he'll still get the villain. You know, so I started thinking about that, like, wow, man, you know, I'm spending my lunch money on this.
1,000 years in the future, black folks on a planet where the black people are slaves in some slave ship world, and when they are free, they dress up like Victorian Europeans.
That needs to be critiqued. Critiqued in a way that shows the problem, the ongoing way in which America has conceptualized black folk.
People kid about it now, you know, they never call him white Superman, but